So in terms of expertise and collaborations, there's a lot of acronyms. I do apologise for the acronyms, and they keep changing, so you might know some of them by different names. But this red section here is probably £300 million a year between them all. So at the earlier stage, we have the biomedical research centres, which are collaborations between leading NHS trusts and academic institutions. And the idea is bringing both academics and clinicians together to conduct research. So these centres tend to have larger research facilities and larger numbers of staff dedicated to research. We have the experimental medicine, cancer medicine centres. This we fund with the Medical Research Council. We have our translational research collaboratives, which some of you charities will be involved with already. The best known one probably would be the Versus Arthritis MSK one. And they still sit quite early within this sort of innovation ecosystem, but their purpose is to bring partners together, whether they're industry, charities, or SMEs, and look at a particular area, look at themes where research could be useful to address them and gaps, and they help coordinate the local environment to actually get more research funding into that space, whether it's through us or whether it's through other mechanisms, their own mechanisms. The health tech research centres are fairly new, but they've been around since 2006. You may have known them as the Mix, and I will talk more about those in the next session because we interact with them a lot. And they cover everything across this space because they help innovators understand where their medtech impacts on the patient pathway, who they might need to talk to. Do they need a health economist? Because they can help signpost people across the system just as we do. And they conduct usability trials. So some of them have dedicated centres with sort of surgical suites. They do a whole range of activities and they're regionally spread. And then we have the Royal College of Surgeons STEP programme. And then towards the later stage, we have the patient safety translational research centres, and they very much are embedded within the NHS and looking at patient safety within the NHS itself. And they are evaluative more than anything else. So although they conduct some research, it's not quite in the same way that the earlier stages would do. And the ARCs are applied research collaborations. They are largely academically based and they're looking at implementation science. They work a lot with NHS England's units, so both Health Innovation Network and other parts of the system, to evaluate the implementation of various changes within the system. Often at quite small scale, but then the results are generally in some way or form generalizable across the system. Then when it comes to trial management, data provision, patients and sample analysis, this really takes up probably the other £332 million a year. The biggest chunk of that sits within the RDN, which is on the top bar within this section of trial management. But before that, we've got the research support service. So if an innovator wants to come to do any kind of clinical evaluation within the UK, they can go to the research support service. We fund them as regional activities across the country to support people finding methodologists, to have advice on what clinical method they're hoping to use and whether they think it'll be useful. They can provide them with access to other parts of the system. And they will often lead into the research delivery network, which is the new name for the clinical research network. So if you get permission to do your trial and you want to start recruiting, they're the people that you would talk to. We also have clinical research facilities, which are bespoke facilities. Usually our involvement with these is purely the research staff to run them that are very dedicated. Sometimes it's actually funding a unit itself. There are some dedicated ones like sleep clinics, which are not part of the normal NHS provision. And then we have the patient research centres. There are 5 of these, but you may not know very much about them because they are aimed at supporting industry deliver phase 3 clinical trials within the UK. And that's part of the very big push that was set up about 3 years ago to get more industry engagement across the system, because of course they bring money to the UK. Data provision, I have a slide and I'll talk a little bit more about this later on, but CPRD is the Clinical Practice Research Data Link. So this is the data link that comes from GP surgeries. And if you consent for your data to be used for research purposes, and there are 16 million individuals that do that, we fund the development of that system and the maintenance of the system and making that data available. I can't remember what CCRIS is, DCRIS, they're somewhat similar. Health informatic collaboratives are really interesting. They're an agreement between 30 trusts and health boards to make secondary care data available for research use. So that's a huge tranche of data that anybody can come and, well, you have to apply for access, but essentially it's made available to researchers. And I'm sorry, I can't remember what HDFR is. I suspect it's changed its name. I don't recognize it. We also link with other people and other organisations. So we link with HDR UK, who I notice are on this call now. We talk to NHS England all the time, and we all talk to Genomics England all the time. And in fact, the Department of Health and Social Care funds £50 million a year specifically to Genomics England. It doesn't come through us, but it's part of their budget. In terms of samples, patients, and analysis, we have the bioresource, which has 200,000 consented individuals who have made their basic phenotype and genotype available for research purposes, and you can select which areas of research you may be interested in participating in. With the National Pheromone Centre, with the National Biosample Centre. So if you have a research contract with us, samples that are taken as part of that research contract, there's a commitment to store them in the National Biosample Centre, and then they'll be made available for others to use under agreement. And then, of course, we have the funding through our research programs, which we'll talk about another time. Throughout all of this, we have different parts of the system are connecting with NICE, with MHRA, with HRA, and the NHS Innovation Service all the time. So parts of us sit on the Innovation Service Management Committee. So anything that comes through that service that is intended to be used within the NHS. I'm not sure actually if you know what the Innovation Service is, because some people it's new from last year. It was a commitment made by government, I think 2 years ago, to help streamline the adoption of drugs and medtech into the NHS. NHS Supply Chain is now hooked into it and have said that in future, if you're an SME, they expect any product that you are producing to be on the Innovation Service if they expect them to procure it. Because basically, if you're not on the Innovation Service, they're not going to procure it into the system, which is quite a fundamental stance that has been a bit quiet and hasn't really taken off yet. But we tell all of our award holders, you must register on the Innovation Service. So that was probably the most detailed slide. And what I'm going to do now is just take bits of that and try to bring it to life in a little bit more, because clearly that was a lot of acronyms. The basic take-home message is we can support all stages of health and care development research. And that is our fundamental role. And that's that ecosystem glue part. And people coming to us obviously don't know the whole system. It's very, very difficult to understand the whole system. So running through quickly, if you are an innovator and you want patients, we offer access to patients because of our access through the Research Design Delivery Network, Clinical Research Network, in recruiting people to trials. But we also, it's not just in secondary care, that's in primary care, social care, prisons, wherever. But we also offer access to patients who have signed up to research, so they'll be part of research, or whether it's through the bioresource, or whether it's the GP practice research data link. So I'm signed up for the GP practice data link, I'm signed up for bioresource, I'm signed up to be part of research. At the moment, those are 3 disconnected systems. But those of you who are using the NHS app at the moment will probably, depending on where you are, because there's been a rollout of this over the country, I can now access Be Part of Research through the NHS app. And that happened last year, and that's been rolled out. So gradually the country is becoming more coherent in the way that it both signposts people across the system, but also links services together so that it appears a bit more streamlined. In terms of expertise, so when I talked about the biomedical research centres, and when I talked about the health tech research collaborations, effectively, they are experts, world-leading experts across the whole of the innovation pathway. Also throw in there the 3,500 academics. They're the NIHR Academy people. So they are personal awards that NIHR funds to be future leaders within the health and care system. They're also available for expertise sharing. Effectively, what the infrastructure does is buy people's time out of NHS contracts to deliver research. So although we use the term infrastructure for that £632 million, it's not buildings, it's actually people. It's funding people to do research to benefit the whole system. It's often said we're the most integrated research system in the world, but we're definitely not easy to navigate. The purpose of this slide is to say that when I showed the earlier one with, say, the biomedical research centres all the way through to the applied research collaborations, there are different, each part of our infrastructure is designed to do different things. They happen to be largely co-located, and this slide shows that. And they're not necessarily regionally based, but they are spread about the country. But you'll also note they're only in England, and that's because health is a devolved issue in the UK. So you can access all of the infrastructure if you're coming to the UK. We can recruit through the research delivery network across all of the UK. Sorry, I might have said that wrong. Yes, our infrastructure is essentially only available for those within England, unless you're coming in, say, as an industry member looking to do a trial here. What the research delivery network does is it allows you to plan, place and perform your research within largely the NHS, but we're expanding out of that now into social care settings and other settings. And you may not know that there's a single form that you can say, right, you're a researcher, you want to potentially put a trial in the NHS, and I can tell you that every single NHS trust in the UK, or in England rather, is research active. So how do you pick them off? There's just a single form that you can come into. That form goes to every single trust. There's a mechanism that then comes back and says, well, we may be interested in your research, we may not be interested in your research. Once you have a place, then we can work with you to try to make sure that the research will be deliverable. And then we help perform it and monitor the performance of it through recruiting patients or participants in the social care setting, and monitoring its delivery overall. And then we report on that to government as part of our metrics. I've said before that we help connect across a range of organisations, so this is just some of them. The thing with Genomics England is interesting because part of what Genomics England does is the whole genome sequencing and diagnostics, and they are the links. So the Department of Health and Social Care funds the £50 billion into Genomics England, and that's part of the link that we have with NHS England over the new surveillance units that are looking to develop genomic approaches to support broader NHS service delivery. So it's another example of where we're kind of very connected. I don't think I need to go through this one anymore, but I'm happy to talk about it afterwards. We are coming to the end now, and I realise I've said quite a lot. In terms of funding, so this is the £402 million a year that we spend on research programmes. We'll only fund within that translational development and evaluation in the health and care system. So whereas parts of our infrastructure support looking at implementation and adoption, the funding programmes itself don't. Effectively, these are Department of Health and Social Care R&D contracts. They're not procurement contracts for NHS or for any other setting. Now, although this is a medtech specific one, at this point, you think of that 1.32 million, we're clearly not the only funder in this space to develop new products. And this is an example of some of the other areas that we know of. In fact, this is the broader landscape, and we work with, certainly we work with Innovate UK, we work with SBRI Healthcare, we have regular catch-ups with the DPFS MRC scheme, we talk to the MRC regularly, we co-fund a research programme with them through the Evidence Mechanism Evaluation Programme. I talk to the Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council regularly, and because I promote NIHR as a follow-on funder for some of their activities. There's some really exciting opportunities around rehabilitation science, for instance, because There's now a national rehab centre that's coming on stream next year. We obviously charities, we engage with charities all the time. And that, I would say that engagement is becoming a little bit more sophisticated because the landscape is changing. What my perception of what charities want to do is really generate more impact from their research funding. And partnering with others is a way to do that. We've seen that through this network. We don't talk to angel investors as much because obviously there's slightly competing terms here, because angel investors are also not, they're not agnostic. We have to be agnostic as a public funder. But we're aware of many and we co-sit on things with many. We organise events with some of them, and we're aware of the major VC capital people certainly in regions, but probably up and down the country. But there are lots and lots of accelerators. There are lots of investors. You can't know them all. It's a kind of swirling landscape of which we're a key part. So pretty much in summary, we offer expertise and facilities, and I'll talk about that in a minute about how you do that. We offer support to set up and deliver trials within the NHS, social care and other settings, and we fund research. That's what we do for the system to promote UK growth and make us a destination to come to. If you want to access us for any reason, we have, if you go into our webpage, so it's nihr.ac.uk, there's a tab which is partnering page, and then there's a contact us form. That single form, you can select whether you want advice on funding, whether you want advice, access to expertise, opportunities to collaborate, whatever it is. There's partly a tick down box, and then you can explain a little bit more about what you want. That comes into a single team that sits within our external affairs area. And then they can go out to any NHS trust, they can go out to all of our senior academics, they can go out to a whole different variety of networks to source advice. And if you're only interested in our research funding, which is probably not relevant to this audience, you can sign up to a newsletter at the bottom like you can with other funders and have a list every week. You get an email every week that just tells you what funding calls are open and what they're looking for if they're a commission call. So if you didn't know who we were before, hopefully you'll know that we are managing agents for the £1.3 billion of R&D funding. Our portfolio is agnostic because we don't have a science strategy, but we do fund the best science, and patient benefit is a key criteria for what we fund within our research programs. And we're becoming more selective as well about our industry engagement and looking at the clinical trials portfolio moving forwards. But I think not all of that is necessarily in the public domain, although you can see the direction of travel. We as funders are not able to recommend individual service providers. I mean, I know quite a few health economists. I know different parts of the system. I would always point you to, say, the research support service or other parts of the system that are able to offer that advice. But generally, from the coordinating centre, we're not able to offer, we don't keep a preferred supplier list. That's not our role. So we always go to the research support service. And if you're not aware, although they're funded by us, they actually offer help to everybody. So charities as well. So if you have a researcher that wants to apply to some of your funding and it's in that translation space, you can point them to the research support service and they will help in whatever way they can. And finally, there's lots and lots of help out there in this translational space. So the Health Innovation Network I think there's 12 of them, they're regionally based. A number of them have innovation academies. So I've done joint events with them to promote ourselves as NIHR and what we offer, but also they present the wider part of the ecosystem. So they host things like Bridging the Gap events. This is the translational gap, the T2, the later stage gap between having a CE marked product or an intervention that's ready to go, and how do you get it into the system there. And they also help offer IP and regulatory support. So there's lots and lots of very varied offerings out there that you have to pick your way through. And then I'm just going to finish here and say that I want to talk, if you will have me back, about our medtech program, because that's one where we're engaged with SMEs, which seems to me to be most like where some of you are as charities in terms of trying to work with SMEs to develop things to push that translational research forward. Thank you.